And I think, if you're coming up with something as well, you're very keen. If you think someone has a solution or is able to help you, you're very keen to be like, great, right, let's do this, this, and this. And sometimes it's just worth kind of taking a step back and going, okay, asking more questions, finding out more about that person, having a few more in-depth conversations rather than just jumping straight into something.
Welcome to the Invention Stories podcast, where we share stories of inventors who turn their idea into a product. Please visit our website at www.inventionstories.com. And now, from the Invention Stories podcast World Headquarters Studios in Morro Bay, California, is our host, Robert Baer.
Welcome to the Invention Stories podcast. I am your host, Robert Baer, and thank you for listening. You're listening to the third part of our three-part series with Ruth Amos and StairSteady. So let's not waste any more time. Ruth, what is DROL Toys, or what are DROL Toys?
So the DROLS is around a set of characters called the DROLS, and they are an educational tech toy. And I'm being careful what I say because it's kind of pre-revenue, so it's currently still in development, but essentially it's aimed at children and looking at the way that they play and learn.
Yeah, it seems to be a theme because you have also Kids Invent Stuff. What is Kids Invent Stuff?
So Kids Invent Stuff is a relatively new project that was started in February, which is a YouTube channel. And me and my friend Shawn, who's also an inventor, in fact, he was young engineer for Britain a few years after I was. We decided that we needed to do more about young people inventing and seeing that their ideas could come to life. And so we came up with this channel, and kind of the idea is fairly simple. Each month we set a different invention challenge. So we've done superhero gadgets, we've done water crossing contraptions, crazy musical instruments, crime fighting gadgets. And each month, 5 to 11-year-olds submit their invention ideas as pictures or as videos, and we choose one to make. So we've made custard firing superhero suits, we've made flaming pianos, we've made robots that make dinner, we've made pedal-powered showers, and they're all inventions that have come in from 5 to 11-year-olds that we've brought to life and filmed the process, and you can see us making things on there and testing these inventions out.
And you have a blog. What is your blog?
Yeah, so I realized that I did quite a few things. And so I thought it might be better to put everything on a single website. So I have a website, just ruthamos.com. And occasionally, I haven't been massively regular at the moment, but occasionally I do blog about things and try and, I sometimes struggle quite a bit with writing. I know what I want to say in my head, but I can't always get it down on paper. And so I think it's good to try and practice things that you're not always good at. So that's kind of where the blog came from. So yes, you probably will look on and see bits of grammar and spelling and all sorts of things, but essentially it's just sometimes it documents some of the things that I've been involved with, and some of the kind of thoughts and weird, wonderful things that happen, really.
That sounds good. So both the DROL Toys and the Kids Invent Stuff about STEM and about learning and making learn fun. Why is that important to you to do? Well,
it kind of comes from the things that I've seen and been involved with, and there's some great things happening for some of the older age groups, but actually a lot of research that's come out has said that we need to be doing more with the younger age group. So a lot of these ideas around kind of careers and what jobs are formed much earlier. And so we need to be showing young people, 5 to 11-year-olds, the sort of things that they could do so that they build those aspirations. And that's particularly important with Kids Invent Stuff because looking back, I spent a lot of time working out why, even though I've ended up being an inventor and an engineer, why did I never see that as a career at school? Because looking back, I used to make things. I used to love Scrap Heap Challenge and Robot Wars and BattleBots and all that sort of thing. Why did I not want to be an engineer when I was at school? And I realized that actually, although it's slightly changed now, but a lot of the time when I watched these programs, there were a lot of women presenting, but not so many women making. And I think it's really important that we are showing girls and boys, that they can make and design, and they can have ideas and they can bring them to life really simply. So a lot of the things that we make on Kids Invent Stuff, a lot of it involves tools that people would have in their shed. We have a series that we run called Big Inventor, Little Inventor, which are things you can build at home. And I just think it's really important that we start changing people's opinions around engineering and inventing much earlier, or else, I mean, we have a massive problem in the UK about women within engineering. Less than 9% of the people within engineering are women, and we need to do something about that. So, yeah, it kind of came from some of those thoughts and thinking, if I was that age, what would really interest me and get me thinking about inventing and engineering and making? And so that's where Kids Invent Stuff came from.
I think when I was young also, there was almost like an assumption that girls can't do math or don't like to do math or things like that. Do you think there was like some sort of bias or like if a girl was young and wanted to do something, do you think she got steered in a different direction, or do you just...
Yeah, I think there are lots of things, and we are seeing a change in that. I think some of it has been that whole kind of, well, engineering is something that boys do thing. And in fact, I didn't even realize it was a problem until the first ever media interview I did when I won Young Engineer for Britain. One of the very first questions, it wasn't even a question, it was like a comment. I was in a studio full of men, and one of them was like, well, you don't look like you are an engineer, you look like you should be in media. And I was like, wow, you're questioning why people, and then the next question on was something like, why do you think women don't take engineering? And I was like, maybe because the comment you've just made to me, like, what do you think an engineer looks like? Like, I think there's a lot of assumptions, and I think there's a lot of, it is changing, and it's great to see so many young people getting involved and making things and trying to, solve problems and really starting on that journey within STEM. But I still think there are some of those assumptions within certain industries of like, well, this is a male-dominated industry, and, I think we're still kind of fighting some of those battles. But actually, if we can get, I never kind of grew up thinking that as a woman I could or couldn't do anything, and that was mainly because I had amazing female role models. I never saw being a woman as a negative thing. I always saw it as a big strength. And so I think if we can show that to other young girls that even, that might not have those same role models, but the fact that they can do whatever they want. If they enjoy this, then that, they can go out and do that. If this is what they love to do, if they've got a talent for this, then they should be doing that and not be put off by the fact that, it's perceived as a male-dominated industry.
I can't agree with you more. I remember at the very end of your TED Talk, you put the 4 words up on the screen, or somebody did, and one of them, it was plan, advice, right people, and what makes you happy. And I think that's great words of wisdom. Do you do a lot of planning?
I think it's important to know what your next steps are, particularly when things go wrong. So I think when things go wrong, the first thing that you automatically want to do is kind of stop what you're doing. Or if you can see something going horribly wrong, you're like, oh no, like, what do I do? And often people freeze. And for me, what I found is that the best thing to do if something doesn't work or you fail is to think, right, so what's the next step? Am I going to take some of this and move forwards? Am I going to start the project again? Am I going to do something different? But having that plan, making you feel like you're moving forwards, often you then end up finding a way out of that situation. Whereas if you kind of just put your head in the sand or kind of feel hopeless about something, you don't ever move on from that. So I think having some sort of plan is important. I'm a big fan of a list. But thinking about, like, where could this go? What do I want this to do? I think is important.
You mentioned advice and seeking advice, and that's great advice. But the right people. Now, what happens when you develop a relationship and you kind of figure out it's not the right person? Do you have a hard time cutting them off, or do you try to work with them? What's your thought process? Does it ever happen?
Yes, I think within these sort of projects, it always does happen. I think some of it is around kind of understanding why you made that decision. I think sometimes people are very quick to put in place legally binding agreements. So they'll be like, oh, this person is really useful, let's give them shares, or this person is really useful, let's let them invest. I think sometimes it's worth having a think about, well, what do I do if this goes wrong? How do I, what if this person turns out to be not the person that I thought they were going to be? And it does happen. And I think a lot of the time it's trying to work out like what is the best, case scenario, like what's the best way to get out of this, if this makes sense. Like, is it the fact that you really struggle to work with them because you're very similar? And is that something actually that you need to look at yourself and think about, how do you manage and communicate with people? Or is it definitely just the wrong person to be either in business with or to have a business relationship with? And then it's about closing that situation down and working a way to get out of that, really. Because it does happen. And I think, if you're coming up with something as well, you're very keen, if you think someone has a solution or is able to help you, you're very keen to be like, great, right, let's do this, this, and this. And sometimes it's just worth kind of taking a step back and going, okay, asking more questions, finding out more about that person, having a few more in-depth conversations rather than just jumping straight into something.
You said earlier before that you do a lot of public speaking. You've gotten to travel a lot, and when I think about England and London and UK, I just think of it from my own mindset that because I live in California, I can go to like Texas and it's like no problem, right? But if I want to go to Europe, it's like a huge hassle. It's a very long flight. I mean, it seems like you have access to so much of the world right there at your doorstep. That's a short flight away from you. So do you go to a lot of countries to do public speaking? And is that how you've gotten to go visit so many countries?
I do a bit. It's mainly within the UK. I would like to do more. Bit of a plug if anyone wants me to come and talk in Europe. I have been lucky. I have done bits of consultancy in bits of Europe, travelled in bits. Like you said, we are very lucky. There are relatively cheap flights to lots of bits of Europe. And even things like the tunnel allows you to get to France very quickly from London. So yes, a lot of the travelling I do tends to be within the UK, but I would like to do more. And next year, hopefully, there's quite a bit more travel coming up into bits of Europe. But yes, I think it is something that I see regularly and I'm like, I should be doing more of this. I should be making the most of this. But yes, I have been lucky to see bits of the world through engineering and inventing, but I'm hoping to see more.
You're involved in so many different projects, from the children's projects to running StairSteady. How do you manage to balance everything? How do you manage to know what to do as a priority, and how do you know what to do when, and how do you prioritize? How do you go about being Ruth?
I don't always get it right. I have a very good team of people who help me in the sense of each different project has a different group of people. So I'm never doing it on my own. Apart from speaking, there are very few things that I do on my own because it allows me to do lots of other things as well. I tend to think I'm pretty good at using my time well. I'm a list person. I have everything organized. I probably don't take enough holidays. I like to work at random times. I have very supportive friends and family who allow me to be a bit of a workaholic. And because I enjoy it, it doesn't always feel like work. So yes, I think I wouldn't be able to do this on my own. It's the fact I work with amazing people that allow me to do so many things.
Well, I'd like to thank you for joining me today. And I'd just like to leave on one last question. What have you enjoyed the most about this whole experience? Well, I guess half of your life. And what makes you happy?
Very good question. I've enjoyed so much. I think that's the thing that I'm struggling with. I've loved meeting people, being involved in different projects, seeing something that was kind of in my head actually be in people's houses and used. I love working with kids invent stuff. I love kind of seeing kids' inventions and bringing them to life. There's so much about what I do that I love, and I think that's the reason that I do it is I've made conscious decisions to do a lot more of what I love and what makes me happy than what doesn't. And I think there have been times where I haven't been as happy, and it's because I've lost sight of some of those things that I really love. The problem solving, the working with other great people, and kind of creating things, even if it's on a really small scale, like even, bringing a kind of a drawing to life. You're creating something, you're bringing something together, and that's what I really enjoy.
You've been listening to episode 11, the final part of a 3-part series, Ruth Amos and StairSteady. I want to thank Ruth Amos for being our guest today. More information can be found at www.stairsteady.net and at www.ruthamos.com. If you're an inventor who would like to be featured on the Invention Stories podcast, have a suggestion on how we can make this podcast better, or would like to become a sponsor, please contact us at inventionstoriespodcast@gmail.com. We invite you to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast at iTunes and Stitcher. More information and show notes can be found at our website, www.inventionstories.com. Thank you very much for listening today, and please tell a friend.